Welcome to Readers of the Lost Art. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Bobby.
And this is our new podcast.
Because we didn't have enough podcasts and we needed more. The official story is Rachel and I are both fans of the same K-pop boy group called ATEEZ. And it's very funny to try to introduce that here in this different space where there may be people who have no idea who they are. If you don't, you should look into them. I'm just saying.
But this podcast won't be about them.
It's not about them.
Don't worry if you're not into K-pop.
Right.
We're not going to be talking about them unless it's... I'm not going to say never. But.
We should not say never. There's always the chance that they will make a guest appearance. We're both fans of the boy group ATEEZ and we're both readers. So we both like to read, and we have a couple of times merged those interests.
Or at least tried to.
One of them that I think has been mostly successful is that we started doing last year in January 2024, but we do a thing called, actually no, it went back further than that. We started that in 2023, late 2023, with this thing that we call Will It ATEEZ, where we read a book that has nothing to do with any part of ATEEZ or their lore, and we make it about ATEEZ. See, can we get some insights into their lore, which is extensive, into the K-pop industry from these totally unrelated books. And we've done that. We started in January 2024, and we are continuing that this year. But we also have this other podcast called HoloChat, where we talk about ATEEZ, all things ATEEZ. And a couple of times on there, we have talked about the books that we have read for that little project.
And our ATEEZ listeners didn't always like those episodes. We didn't announce the books we were going to talk about, so it's not like anyone could read along with us.
We just showed up and we're like, hey, we read this book and we're going to talk about it. Which I'm not saying that we're not going to do that anymore on the other podcast, but it just sort of blossomed into this, what if we take all of our book talking and we just do a whole separate podcast that's only about books? And so that's where it began.
And there's another secret podcast coming soon, but...
It's very exciting. Stay tuned for that one.
We wanted to dive deep into a book, learn everything we can about the lore and the history and the world. And so for this first season of Readers of the Lost Art, we have decided to dive deep into murder.
Yes.
So season 1 is 100 Years of Murder.
Except it's really 120. That was just less catchy.
So we're going to be reading a mystery novel from every decade, starting from the 1900s to now.
Or to 2019.
Yes.
Since we're still in the 20s. One of the reasons that we decided to do something where we're kind of going back in time is, one, I think both of us are pretty terrible at keeping up with the newest books that are coming out.
That's true.
I mean, I know that you've long dreamed of being a book talker, bookstagrammer.
But anytime someone mentions a book talk book, I'm like, what?
What? I've never heard of this person.
My dreams are so far from reality. I don't even watch book talk.
Right. So we thought, what if we talked about the books that nobody else is talking about? You know, what if we were hair flick and not like the other girls? So we're going to be talking about this sort of purpose of this podcast is to find a topic and sort of delve deep into it. And like Rachel said, we're going to start with murder, as one does.
We had talked about other genres, and I don't know why we ended up here. We're expecting next season will be a different genre, a different kind of vibe, but I don't know why we decided to do the first season for murder. I think because it's everyone likes mystery novels, right? Yeah. It's an easy entry point.
I don't know where the 100 years came from. It just sort of is there, but
sometimes
I don't know.
We'll just start talking and the ideas will evolve, and it's really unclear who comes up with what idea or how it came up. But then it's so far from what we were. I think our original pitch was 1980s romance novels, and here we are.
Yeah, which I'm still standing on those 1980s. We're gonna get into the Bodice Rippers. I think that would be a lot of fun.
That's for season 2.
Yeah,
as a reward for going through 100 years of murder.
Well, we're getting a full scope and sequence of how detective novels evolved, and I think all of our authors are American. I'm pretty sure
think that is accurate.
Well, A.A. Milne is Canadian, but
there's at least one novel that's set in London. I don't know if the author is also from the UK or if it's just that they made the setting there. So
things that we'll find out as we do actual author research and such.
Part of the thing that we plan to do is we're going to play this bingo game with the books. And so neither of us have looked into the books that hard. We are totally unprepared. At this point, we haven't even read our first book. because we wanted to come in just like knowing nothing about murder.
Right.
I'm not even a true crime person, so.
I'm a former true crime person, I think, technically, because I haven't really, I don't know why, I'm just not really in the vibe for death and destruction right now.
But here we are.
Well, the realistic death and destruction. Maybe I can handle some fictional.
I have long, though, like this is so true, I've long been a fan of Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm like so alone in this. All of my friends hate Poe. all of my writer friends, all of my reader friends, they hate Poe, which is so unfortunate for me. I have like a poster of Poe. I've read all of his short stories. Poe is like the creator of the modern detective novel.
That is true. That's true. We have to give him his credit for that.
Poe is a very... And I've read a lot of biographies about Poe. So I am really, really into Poe. And I'm also really into Agatha Christie's one book. I've only read the one.
Which one?
I know. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's on my bookshelf. The one where they all go to the island and die. And Then There Were None.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So I'm a big fan of And Then There Were None. I used to be an English teacher, and that was one of the books we read. And it's such a fun book to read with 8th graders because it's really shocking to them. Like, they get really into it, and you can really, like, instill this love of this type of writing. So I was really into that one book. So that's really my experience with mystery novels. It's not a genre that I go to a lot. I don't read a lot of them. I've read some YA mysteries because I am a writer and was writing a YA mystery. So I read a bunch then, but otherwise it's not really a genre that I go to a lot.
I mean, I was an OG mystery lover because I read all of the Nancy Drew books.
Oh, I guess I did read Nancy Drew when I was little.
But she was like my first introduction to like chapter books when I was in like, 2nd and 3rd grade. Like that was it. I would go to our school library and I would get a new Nancy Drew book every week, and then I started collecting them. And I don't know if every family is like mine, but if you're in my family and you like announce that you're collecting a thing, that will become your birthday and Christmas presents until you've got everything. And I know that like my mom and grandmother also started collections for me that I was like not interested in, but that has nothing to do with books. So I will leave that. But I guess this kind of leads us into our next segment of this introductory extra. Okay.
Bailey School Kids. Did you read the Bailey School Kids when you were growing up?
No, I don't know what that is.
It was kind of mystery. I was also really into Scooby-Doo. And this is kind of like that. It was called like My Teacher Is Not a Vampire. And there would be all these clues that the teacher was a vampire, but then at the end it would be like, a real reason why they seemed like a vampire. But then you were left with this like, well, maybe they are a vampire. And so I was so into those growing up. Like, I read all of those. I got my son into reading them, too. So the Bailey School Kids, I think, were actually my first mysteries.
Who wrote those?
Okay. I don't know. It was probably, like, Nancy Drew, and they were just written by a bunch of different people, and they put, like, a name on them. They're very good. They're much shorter. They're, like, early chapter books, and they have, like, a picture in front of the chapters.
Oh, I probably skipped over that whole genre. I was like, I'm going straight to crime. Sorry.
When I was in elementary school, we got these points for reading books. And I read most of these in, I think, the 5th grade. So it was like right before I went to middle school. But these were like marked as books that were for 3rd graders. So I didn't get very many points, but I read all of them. So, so they were even like young for me when I read them. But I was really into and I'm still into this trope, the like, is it magic or is it real? And like, is the narrator crazy or are they not? Like, that's something that I really enjoy in a book.
I mean, well, if you like Poe, you gotta love an unreliable narrator.
And I love Poe. Okay.
So one of the things we thought, would be good for this first introductory episode, just to help people kind of figure out, like, if this is the vibe for them, is we would do we're kind of thinking of it as panels, but that is only because we were recently last weekend at the Love Y'all Book Fest in Atlanta, Atlanta, Georgia.
A super fun time. So if you're into romance, you should go to that next year.
Yes. But we were there, and of course we attended a bunch of the panels for the writers. And so when we came up with we'll just like come up with questions and then we will answer them to sort of like an interview, but also just like a chatty, let's just chat about things. So we've each kind of come up with some questions to ask each other that's going to help expand on our worldview as readers. Would you like to go first?
Well, one of the questions that I was going to ask was like, what was the book that made you fall in love with reading?
Well, my answer is actually not Nancy Drew.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah. The very first chapter book that I ever picked up, so let me back up. Here's the thing with me is there's always lore. So here's the lore. My grandfather my mom's dad, was a huge reader. He was subscribed to like the Reader's Digest Book of the Month Club kind of thing. So he just had scores and piles of books. And in their downstairs, they had a whole wall that had built-in bookshelves with all of these books. And one of the very first books that I picked up off of that shelf when I was very, very young, I don't even remember how young I was, but this was like before I was really reading, kind of on my own. I picked up Alice in Wonderland, and actually I still have it, but I think it's in the other room. But it was a Reader's Digest copy of Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, with a couple of Lewis Carroll's poems and a letter, I think, in there. And I loved it so much. Like, to this day, it is probably my top favorite book. I just loved everything about it. I loved the illustrations by Sir John Tenniel. I loved how silly it was. I love Alice as a character because she just kind of takes everything in stride. Just like everything is crazy, but I guess that's just how it is. So that was my foundational text of my life. What's yours?
Mine was Harry Potter. I said that I read The Bailey School Kids when I was in 5th grade, which is true. And I, had probably read some other books. I'm sure I did because I was always chasing after those points that my school was giving out. But I didn't become like a reader until my 6th grade English teacher actually read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone out loud to us in our homeroom class. Because at my middle school, they did this thing where like for 20 minutes, the homeroom teacher had to read a book out loud to you. And then the rest of the hour was like class. And so she read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and I loved it. And like at this time, the 2nd and 3rd ones were already out, I think. So I like immediately read those, or maybe just the 2nd one was already out, and I started buying them when they came out after that. That should give you a good idea of like how old I am. So
I will tell you, I didn't start reading Harry Potter till I was in grad school.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they've been out for a while. I think that we were up to Harry 5. And I know that 6 came out while I was in grad school, and then 7 came out just after I finished grad school and like moved to Atlanta for the first time.
Yeah, 7 came out when I was in college, I know. I just said that I discovered those in the 6th grade, and then the 7th didn't come out until I was in college. So like all the way through high school, that really shaped my identity and like I was deep into Harry Potter. That was what people knew about me at school. I gave like a speech in my high school speech class about how cool Harry Potter is. I was also like one of those people that, not like other girls. So I would like carry my Harry Potter blanket to class and cover myself up with it. Just so, so the people could know how cool I was at all times.
Cool and cold, too.
Cool and cold. And my high school best friend I made because someone else told me that she liked Harry Potter. So I like ran up to her and I was like, you like Harry Potter? I like Harry Potter. And then we just decided we would be best friends. And we were best friends through all of high school.
So nice. So easy in high school.
I know. That's also how I became friends with Bobby. I was like, hey, you like reading and ATEEZ, and I like reading and ATEEZ. We can be friends.
Yes.
But so Harry Potter was the book for me. And like, it was a gateway book because while I was like waiting for the other books to come out, I would read other things because I wanted that same experience.
Chasing that
Harry
high.
Potter's. Yeah. And then post that, it was Twilight.
Yeah.
We're big Twilight fans here, I think.
I am a fan of Twilight, sort of begrudgingly, because I recognize that it's a very flawed series, but listen, I'm going to tell you something about me, and that is I believe believe you should do what you want. You should love what you want. And as long as you're being smart about it and you're not hurting anybody, just it's fine. So I get very tired of all of like the Twilight hit pieces. There was a lot of them.
Yeah.
And we've sort of circled around to where admitting that you like Twilight is now fine again.
Yeah.
But for a long time, it was just a lot of Stephenie Meyer hate. And I understand she's done some things that are worth hating. It's fine, whatever.
And so has J.K. Rowling. I just,
oh yeah, for sure.
a lot of things.
I'm also very much, I subscribe to the death of the author theory.
Same.
And I think in both of those cases, those authors have metaphorically died.
Yeah.
You know, Harry Potter is its own thing now. And while I know that there are some people who simply cannot support it because they don't agree with J.K. Rowling, that's totally fine.
It's totally understandable.
But I also am kind of over this attacking the book itself and picking out all of these flaws and everything that is wrong with it because it's cool to hate on things that everybody else loves.
Right.
I'm just kind of over that. And I'm like, I'm not saying people can't do it. I'm saying that if you do it, I'm not going to watch your YouTube video. Like, that's where we are.
Yeah,
so,
which is fine.
yeah, I'm like, yeah, like there was a video. So I'm a big romantasy person. That is my favorite genre to read, has been my favorite genre to read for a long time. And there was a video on YouTube that came up on my feed that was, why is every romantasy book so bad? And I'm kind of like, you know what, get over yourselves. That's my initial reaction. But I did like click in just to see like what people were talking about. And it's not necessarily that I disagree with them. Like, this is not high literature. Nobody ever said it was gonna be high literature.
Right.
But it's a lot of people like, oh, well, I loved Lord of the Rings, so I just want Lord of the Rings with a love story. Well, first of all, Lord of the Rings does have a love story. It's just very buried beneath all the politics and whatever. But it's just, there's just sort of this general, I'm so much better than everybody else because I don't love this thing that everybody else loves, you know? And I just don't agree with that vibe. And I think people need to get over it and just let people, and I know that people also push back on the let people love what they want to, you know, just let people read and have fun. I'm like, this is not me being anti-intellectual. Be intellectual all you want, but just be aware you're not better than everybody else just because you are being more critical. Okay. That's all I'm saying.
Well, it's like not every book that you read has to be high literature. It doesn't have to make you think and leave you wondering. Like, just like not every movie I watch is, right? Like, no one complains about the Transformers movies. Well, some people complain about the Transformers movies, but like some things can exist to entertain, and it can be a simple story and still have an impact, a theme, and be entertaining. Like, all of those things can coexist. Like, it doesn't have to, oh, that's just like a stupid book to waste time. Like, that doesn't mean, like, just because it's not high literature doesn't mean that I got nothing out of it. Meet my dog. He's here.
Recurring characters in the Montini universe. I want to know, what would you classify as your comfort reads?
I lately have been kind of genre hopping. For a long time, what I liked to read and what I found comfortable to read was young adult. So I've long been into the young adult genre. Like, that was where I found the books that I liked the most. But I would say within like the last year and a half, I have not enjoyed a lot of the young adult books that I have read. So I've been kind of trying to move on to different genres. So I did get into a period where I was reading mysteries and I read gothics, and I liked doing the Will at ATEEZ that we were talking about earlier because I got to try some different genres. Right now I am reading a lot of rom-coms, and that is what I'm enjoying. So I don't know that I have a specific comfort read, but right now it's rom-coms.
I mean, given the climate, it feels...
I do think that the climate plays a lot into it. Like, I feel like the conversation about young adult literature has changed so much in the year and a half. And, as an adult person who has a small child and I'm watching the news and seeing the things that are happening, it's hard for me to connect with a young adult character in the same way I think I could in a simpler time. And so it just doesn't hit for me anymore.
Yeah. I was noticing that yesterday. I've been reading a young adult mystery, sort of a mystery scavenger hunt kind of book, by one of the authors from the Love Y'all Book Fest that we were at last weekend. I feel like in a different time, I might have been a little more into it, a little more forgiving of the flaws. Yeah. But to me, the young adult, it was like it was trying to be, I don't know know how to explain, but it was like, it didn't make sense. It really didn't make sense. And I felt like it was kind of talking down to its audience in a way, as though, you know, young adult kids, you know, teenagers wouldn't be able to understand something that was, you know, just really going to go, like, really lean into the themes that it seemed to be trying to present. But also I felt like the end of the story was about, well, if you just have a lot of money, it's all going to be okay. And I'm like, well, that's true. Like, that's literally true, but not what I want right now. Like, that's not super fun to read about. So, but that was literally like everything worked out fine because they all got the money, is how the end of the book was. And it was like, oh, okay, that's great. I love that.
It is also true that a lot of the young adult books that I have read recently feel a little preachy. Like, they're trying to tell me a certain thing about the world, and I can see with my own eyes that the world is not doing that. This is how the world should be. And it's like, I agree, but that's not how the world is. And it doesn't feel escapist. It just doesn't feel good. So I feel like that's another problem I've had with young adult recently. Though we did talk about doing a young adult dystopian season. We'll have to wait for happier times.
Yeah, hitting a little too close to home right now. So mine would be, I've got two. First would be the Anne of Green, actually not just Anne of Green Gables, but all of Lucy Maud Montgomery. Just everything that she wrote is so cozy and comforting and makes me feel like weirdly homesick in a way anytime I read them. Like this, I was meant to live during this time period where I didn't have a car. I didn't have to deal with car stuff. And I could just walk to my job and I could teach simple things. And I would just, you know, I know that's very idealistic and romanticizing the whole thing, but like, it just feels so cozy in a way that soothes my soul. Particularly the Anne of Green Gables series, I think would be my favorite, but the Emily of New Moon series, underrated. People should look into that one. So if you like Lucy Maud, but you haven't gotten into the Emily of New Moon series, you should try it. Also, a lot of her collections of short stories were so good. Her journals too, if you can find her, like her diaries, it's like a 4-volume set of all of her diaries. It's like reading a Lucy Maud Montgomery story because like she talks about, you know, hanging out with friends and love interests, and it's very, very good. So if you can find those, which you can't because I looked and they were fine, but they are very good. So if your library has them, check them out.
I remember our book club I'm in the Forever Young Adult Book Club, which is like a national book club. And we read, I think like 3 years ago, we read the Emily of New Moon book, like the first one.
The first one.
And I don't remember it. I'm not even sure I finished it. So it didn't hit for me the same way, I guess.
I just think they're so cozy. The first one I don't think is the best one. First one is when she's very young. It's the second one when she's sort of like in her teenage years. And we get sort of the love story going on in the second one. And then there's also this sort of mystic kind of undertones that start up. It's very interesting. But anyway, I recommend them. If you want Anne of Green Gables, but the character doesn't have red hair, she's got black hair. But anyway, I liked them a lot.
I'm pretty notorious for showing up to the book club without having read the book, so it's possible that I didn't even open it. So I just remember that we had a meeting.
And she was there for it. No memory of what went down. My other one is very specific, and it is a book called Just Be Yourself by Mary Bard. I do not know anything about this author. This is another one that I picked up off of my grandfather's bookshelves when I was much older and just read it and absolutely loved it. And it makes no sense. There's no reason I should love this book, but it is about like a 50s housewife she has 3 daughters. Her husband is a doctor. She lives in like Pacific Northwest in Washington, I believe. And one of her daughters really wants to join what is essentially the Girl Scouts, but there aren't enough leaders to lead the Girl Scouts. And her daughter's just devastated because she can't get into this group because there aren't enough leaders, and you really can't have too many kids. You really can't have more than 15 kids per like group. And so it turns into this whole thing where she basically, along with like her best friend Susan, they just revive the Girl Scouts, and she does it so reluctantly. She's like, I don't really want to get involved, but I'm going to go to this meeting. I'm going to call this woman. And it turns into them having like 3 separate groups, and it's like a whole thing, but it's so cozy and like that very idealistic, when people look back at the good old days and it was so much better, and it really wasn't so much better.
No.
But it was just, it's very cozy and idealistic and just fun and just such an easy read that it is, when I was in college, it would be the book that I would read when I was just so stressed and just couldn't even deal with anything. I would just curl up on my little bed with my Mary Bard and read it. And it has continued to be one of my favorite books of all time. So a real deep cut.
I actually need to change my answer a bit. I do have a single comfort read that is not a genre. It is a single book. The Christmas Carol, which Bobby already knows because I talk about The Christmas Carol almost as much as I talk about Poe. Yeah. So I love The Christmas Carol. I love the book. I love the story. I love the adaptations. I read The Christmas Carol every year by Charles Dickens. Like, I reread the book every year during Christmas time. This past Christmas, I did a thing where every weekend in December, I went to see a different adaptation of The Christmas Carol. And I had a very busy December, so fitting that in was a real task. But that is a story that brings me a lot of joy, a lot of comfort. So if I have a comfort read, it is The Christmas Carol. Okay, what is the book that you've read that you think about the most often? Like, that you go back to and think about?
Okay, my answer, see, here's the thing. I tend to think a lot about books like right after I've read them.
Yeah.
I have my comfort reads that just sort of, there's always just in the back
Banging
of my
around
mind,
in there.
you know.
Yeah.
But there is a book that I read that stuck me. Actually, there are two. There are 2 books that I have read in recent years. So like not super recently, but just in the past like 5 years or so that I've read, and they really got a grip on me in an upsetting way. And the first one is Things Fall Apart by, and I'm going to say the name wrong, but I think it's like Chinua Achebe. Everyone should read this book. And I do mean that. I think it is very important. It is about, I don't remember where they are in Africa. I don't even know if they ever say it, but it is about a man and a tribe somewhere in Africa. It is about like it's just about his life. And then, you know, he's got like 4 different wives, and he has a son that is his biological son. And then he has another son that he has adopted, but it's like a weird thing where he has adopted from a tribe that they were at war with. And so this is kind of part of the tribe's punishment, is they lose one of their sons. And there's like a lot of drama with that, because the adopted son is like really takes after him and is somebody that he really connects with and he loves him. And then his biological son is very different. He's very sensitive. He's very like wants to be more educated and doesn't want to live this very like rough tribesman kind of lifestyle. And then on top of that, towards the end of the story, I mean, it's kind of spoilers, but not really, but it is also about colonization, about religion being introduced into like, you know, white Christian missionaries showing up and sort of enforcing their beliefs on the people. Just one of the most upsetting books I think I've ever read. There is, and I want to talk about it. I want to talk about the number one thing that upset me the most in that book, but it is a major spoiler, and I do feel like people should read it. But if you have read it, I feel like you know what the thing is that upset me so much. I had to read it for grad school, and I just could not stop thinking about this. Just could not stop thinking about how upset I was with this book and how I think the book is actually very, very good. And like I said, everyone should read it, but just please know that you are gonna be upset when you read it. So that's one. The other one that I know you've heard me complain about multiple times is Pachinko.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think everybody should read that book.
Well, I think it's important for our lore for everyone to know that Pachinko was made into a TV show that's on Apple TV, and Lee Min-ho is in it. And I love Lee Min-ho, which is my only interest in Pachinko.
Pachinko was rough, and there were a lot of things about it that were really good, but it was just like you just got hit over and over and over and over and over again, and it was like you couldn't escape a chapter without tragedy. Not a single chapter. And while I agree that books like that are very important, and it's important to tell those stories, it was such a struggle to read it. Like, I was really fighting for my life. I mean, truly. And I did finally, I felt like winning a war when I finally finished it, but then I was the loser, actually, because now this book is stuck in my brain. Those are my two books that have lived with me.
I feel like a lot of books that live with us are either very good, they live with us because they're so good and beautiful, or because they're so bad, they're so upsetting. And there's like not a lot of in between. There are scenes from books that live with me more than books themselves. Like, I can remember a horrifying scene from this one mystery novel that I read when I was in law school, and it was like a torture scene, and that's all I remember about the book. I don't remember anything else. I just remember this awful way that this man was tortured. So that's not my book, but like that. So when I was like thinking about this, I was like, you know, all of these scenes were popping into my head, and I was like, I don't even know what those books are. Like, just like scenes. But a book that has stuck with me all the time, and I've never gone back and reread it, but when I was in high school, I read Enchantment by Orson Scott Card.
Okay.
Who wrote Ender's Game, right?
I think so.
Which I didn't like. So, and I understand that Orson Scott Card is like a horrible person, I think.
It feels right.
I mean, possibly. Maybe he's great. I don't know. I don't know anything about him, but I feel like I remember people saying that he's like really problematic and horrible. But he has this like Sleeping Beauty retelling called Enchantment. And it's just really, I don't know. It was just this book that really stuck with me. This Baba Yaga was in it. When people ask me for like fantasy book recommendations, that's always the one I give, even though it's so old. It was published in 1999.
Okay.
And I don't really remember anything about it except that like I read it when I was in high school and I loved it so much. And that's all I remember about it. So, but it's a book that I think about all the time for no reason. So that one, and then the other book that I think about a lot is Time Traveler's Wife. Which is I don't feel like I need to say anything else.
Another upsetting one. I just finished reading The Psychology of Time Travel. And I don't recommend. I feel like I both do and don't recommend it. It was impossible. I was not smart enough for that book without like taking notes of who the characters are and where we are on which timeline, and being able to really puzzle the logistics of multiple time travelers, like being able to exist within all of your different selves, being able to coexist, which is the same thing with The Time Traveler's Wife.
Yeah.
But in this book, it's time travelers would go forward and backwards in time. They basically exist outside of time because they're just going everywhere and meeting all these different versions of themselves. And they had like this part where they had like a lexicon of time traveler lingo and like, you know, people who would go back in time and have relationships with their younger selves. And I was like, oh, that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
super weird stuff like that. There was one charming thing that I thought, I was just like, oh, I kind of love this idea. But each time traveler would, at the end of like, once they become older, they would write a journal that they would then deliver to themselves when they were very young. But the journal just didn't make any sense to the young time traveler until they got to the end of their life, and then they could like puzzle out what everything meant. I just thought that idea was very interesting. But that was the only thing I liked about that book. It was a real slog to get through. In a way, though, it was like I knew I was reading something interesting and I knew it was doing something groundbreaking, but I felt too dumb to appreciate it. Okay, question number 2. Let's do an easy one.
Okay.
I want to talk about tropes. Love a trope.
I love a trope as well.
What are your most and least favorite tropes?
Well, you already know that my favorite trope is fake dating. I love fake dating. I just think that is so fun. I think one of the first times I encountered it was in To All the Boys I Loved Before. Don't they have a fake little relationship in that?
Yes, they do.
So I really love a fake dating trope. I think that's very fun. I said earlier that I love the trope, is the narrator crazy? Is what's happening real? It doesn't even always have to, like, I love an unreliable narrator, but it doesn't just have to be a narrator. Just the lingering question of like, was it magic? Like that's a thing that I really enjoy a lot. I both love and hate a fake death. So I think it really depends on how it's executed, but in And Then There Were None, there's like a very famous faked death, and spoilers, I guess.
I'm sorry, if you haven't read it by now, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, if you haven't read And Then There Were None by now, I don't think you're going to, even though I strongly recommend it, but like, so I loved that, and I love when I see that trope again, like someone doing a fake death. Like, I think that's very fun. The Sherlock Holmes fake death. I think it can be very fun. I also think it can be very stupid, but I think it can be very fun.
It entirely depends on how it's done.
There are a lot of romance tropes specifically that I hate. Like, I hate secret baby, and I think you do as well. I once read a book that offended me to my core. I actually think it was a novella. The woman had... I don't even think this is a secret baby trope. We'll see. You can tell me. The woman had a baby. So the guy knew she had a baby. And then when he's, like, sleeping with her, he's like, her body's not marred by the signs of pregnancy. Like, I don't understand how you've had this baby and you don't have stretch marks. Like, this is crazy.
Gross.
And it turned out that it was like someone else's baby that she had raised, but she pretended it was her own. And I was like, gross, 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 gross. This was like shortly after I had a baby. And I was like, thank you for making me feel bad about my body. So thanks, romance novel, for that. I think because I've had a child, I'm very sensitive to romances where a child is involved, because I cannot suspend the disbelief when I see a woman just out gallivanting and I know she's got a child at home and I'm like, that 2-year-old baby's not taking care of itself.
I know. Like, where are you getting your child care, ma'am?
Basically, any romance novels where there's babies really tend to rub me the wrong way, because I don't think they're done well. When they're done well, it's great, but it's very rare.
I mean, building right off of that, you're right. My least favorite is specifically the accidental pregnancy. I don't like that at all. I don't want it. Get it out of here. I don't care. I really hate it when you get like your happily ever after and the girl gets immediately pregnant. And that's painted as this, oh, now they can really be happy.
Yeah.
I read a lot of webtoons. That's sort of my bedtime story at night. I just, scroll some fun little webtoons. I read all I don't read anything of substance. That's not, you don't do substance right before bed. But a lot of them, when you go into the comments, people talk like it's a thing. People just are so desperate for these characters to get pregnant. And I'm like, you need to calm down. That's not what I want. Because I'm like, I'm looking at it realistically, and I know that as soon as they have this baby, they're not going on adventures anymore. Like, that's done. So the story basically is going to come to a grinding halt as soon as there is a baby in the picture. And I don't know why that's the life that y'all want. I don't have children. I do not want children. I have never really wanted children. Especially once my sister started having children, I was like, this is not for me. Sorry. So that just really kind of puts a wrench in my enjoyment of the story. As soon if there's any hint of a baby, I'm like, okay, I'm out. Sorry. So that is my least favorite. I think my favorite, specifically romance trope, is marriage of convenience, which I think is just like a step sibling of fake dating. Yeah. But I like a marriage of convenience. I think, one, because I would totally do a marriage of convenience. Don't even joke with me right now. I would.
Especially to a lord?
I know.
Yes.
Okay. If it comes with a house, I'm in. So yeah, I like a marriage of convenience because it has a lot of the other tropes that I enjoy, like forced proximity, sometimes enemies to lovers, rivals to lovers, grumpy sunshine, opposites attract, that sort of thing. So I enjoy a marriage of convenience. I would love to see some genre mixing. I would like to see a marriage of convenience, but we put it in like a mystery. You know, let's just play around.
Maybe that already exists. We just don't know.
It probably does out there somewhere.
Another one that I hate is The Chosen One.
I love A Chosen One. But it does depend on how it's done. Yeah. Because what I don't like is a Mary Sue character. And so when The Chosen One is also a Mary Sue, I'm like, no, stop that. I don't want this.
I think it's my affinity for Harry Potter that makes me not want any more Chosen Ones. Like, well, Harry Potter was the Chosen One.
But he wasn't. And that's what's interesting.
Well, yeah. But like...
Yes and no.
So I can't... Whenever I'm reading a story of another Chosen One, I'm like, well, he's not Harry Potter.
He's not Harry Potter.
So it's really hard for me to get there. And I think think because Harry Potter was so big and it was so everywhere, and then after Harry Potter came, there was like a big slew of other young adult stories published with chosen ones. I wonder if I read a chosen one story now, maybe it would hit better.
I feel like these days they do them a little more subtly. Like they don't just hit you over the face immediately with, well, you're the chosen one, and then you just live with that mantle the whole time. I think that it sort of gets revealed throughout the way. There was no other person that could have done this thing. But I do love a chosen one. They make me happy. I like it when somebody is the one. I will say the question that I came up with that I wasn't going to ask because it was too hard, but maybe just to give you some food for thought, is who is one character that you love to hate and another character that you hate to love. And I came up with the most obvious love to hate, and that's Dolores Umbridge. But I couldn't think of a character that I hate to love. I'm like, I'm sure there's somebody out there, but I just couldn't think of one.
That is hard.
Like, I feel for me, it's going to be some man who is terrible and toxic, but that I'm still like, okay, but like, I would marriage and convenience him though, you know?
I mean, if I was going to pick from like a big book, like there's probably other books where this is true. Smaller books, and I can't really remember the titles, but I have a lot of love for Jasper from Twilight. And he's not very good.
No, he's really not.
Wasn't he like in the wrong side of the Civil War?
He was a Confederate soldier, yeah.
Yeah, like that's really bad. So there's nothing to like there.
He does have a vibe about him. I will give you that.
I also, like, he was helped by the fact that in the movie he was played by Jackson Rathbone, and when I was growing up, I found Jackson Rathbone to be incredibly hot, even though
I couldn't tell you one single thing about him.
He looks crazy in that movie. Every scene, he looks insane.
They give him a newer, more crazy wig, and it's like, what is going on?
So I, off the top of my head, that is who I would say that I hate to love. I hate that I love Jasper, and that like that's the one I would want to marry. The other one is, I can't even remember his name, but it's from the very famous like TikTok series right now, A Court of
Thorns and Roses.
Right, it's the one that's got Rysand in it, right?
Yeah.
The one that's not Tomlin.
I hated him.
I hated him too, and I kind of love to hate him. I loved him in the first book. I was like so charmed by him, and then it all falls apart after that, and I think that's like true for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I don't trust any of her first loves for her, because I guess my hate to love is Kale from Throne of Glass.
Oh, yeah.
I loved him. I was so for him. And when she first meets whoever the guy is that she ends up with, I haven't finished that series, but the elf lord that she ends up with, when she first met him, they were specifically not romantic.
Yeah.
And I think I wrote it in my book journal. I'm like, wow, this is so interesting that she's going to meet this super hot man and they're just going to be friends. You never see that. I was so naive. I didn't know what was going to happen. And so when she goes back to the place wherever Kale lives. I'm sorry, Throne of Glass stands. I don't remember all the names.
I know.
But when she goes back to him, his whole character gets retconned because he was this very like shy and reserved character in the beginning of the series. And then we see his perspective. He's like hooking up with some girl in like a back hallway of a bar or something. Like against a wall? My Kale would never. What are you talking about? He would blush anytime, what's her face, Aylin, I think, or Selena, or whatever her name was. Anytime she would like say anything mildly suggestive to him, he would like get super red. And then they had this whole thing in order to make him make sense with another character, I think, to give him a different romantic arc. They like totally gave him a whole different like vibe. Yeah. And I was so mad. I was so furious. So I guess he's my, I hate to love because he turned out kind of disappointing in the end.
I want to say that I read these books like way before they were popular. Like I read them so long ago. Like I don't even people talking about them now. I'm like trying to like piece together what I remember, because I read A Court of Thorns and Roses like 7 years ago. Yeah, it was a long time ago.
I read it before the sequel was out, and I don't.
Yeah, it's so shocking to me when people are like talking about it. I'm like, whoa. Oh.
Like when I realized that they had become popular again, I was like, what do you mean? What is TAG? What is ACOTAR? And then people were like, oh, it's A Court of Thorns and Roses. Oh my gosh, I read that a million years ago. Why are we pulling these books out of the grave? So that was kind of wild.
I loved them when I read them the first time. I haven't gone back and read them again now that everyone's talking about them.
I haven't finished them. I still need to go back and finish them.
I didn't finish the Throne of Glass series. I had finished, like I said, I read these so long ago. Like, I've lived in this house that I live in now for 4 years ago, and I have for 4 years, and I have very specific memories of reading these books in my prior house. So whatever was out and published when I was alive 4 years ago, that's what I've read too for A Court of Thorns and Roses.
So you were reading them during the pandemic.
I was reading them right before the pandemic, because I literally moved during like the pandemic weekend.
That one weekend of the pandemic, yeah.
You know, when everything shut down and no one would do anything?
I so specifically remember, yes.
Yeah, that is when I moved. They had me sign the paperwork for the house in a room by myself, and they had like a computer up on the other side where they were like talking to me, walking me through signing these housing papers. And it was like hard to get movers to come. We had to like keep all the windows open while we were moving so that, you know, that we could have air circulating. Everyone was wearing masks. We had Lysol that we were like spraying on everything after the movers touched it, because this was like, it was literally like everything shut down in that week of March, and then the next weekend we were moving to a new house. So there's some Rachel lore for everyone. Okay, shall we get into bingo, or should we talk about our schedule and then talk about bingo?
Our first book that we're going to be reading is called The Circular Staircase by Mary Roberts Rinehart. That was published, I didn't write the published dates. I know it was published between 1900 and 1909. So we're going all the way back to the beginning of the 1900s for this one.
I'm feeling 1907, but
it feels, I don't know, it feels good. I will tell you, if you are interested in reading it, if it is not available at your library, it is on Project Gutenberg now. So if you have like an e-reader or a tablet, you can download the PDF or the EPUB file for that. I have mine on my Kobo. I am a Kobo girly now.
And we'll put a link to it in the description of this episode and in the episode where we actually talk about it. We're not talking about it today because neither of us have read it yet.
That episode is scheduled to come out, so you know when you need to have read the book by, but the episode is coming out on Tuesday, March 25th.
Which is 2 weeks from today.
You have 2 weeks to read this book. Clear your schedule. But one thing I've noticed about us is we like to gamify things.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if you've noticed that about us, but we like a game. And the game that we're also we're big bingo stands. So just get used to that. We're ready for we're ready to retire, basically.
Yeah, when bingo is like on the table, we both get really excited.
Like, yes.
Oh, bingo
here.
Board? Okay.
I am ready. So we have made bingo boards for our expectations.
And we have a blank bingo board that we will link on our website, which we'll put a link to in the link of this episode. So you can make your own bingo board. While you're like rushing through reading this book, you can look at our bingo boards and make your own bingo board. And the winner is going to get to be cool.
Yes. Winners of bingo are always cool.
And that's it. The prize is the pride that you feel in your heart. So, which is the best prize.
If you're me, winning bingo for the first time ever.
Our first season is 100 Years of Murder. So this bingo board is just for our first season of this podcast. We have 5 categories for bingo. We like to really make categories. A lot of people just like throw stuff on bingo boards. That's not us. That's not our vibe. We're category people. So we've got setting, characters, wild card, plot tropes, or plot/tropes, and investigation. Okay. And there is like a ton of overlap in those, and they can kind of be mixed and matched.
There isn't as much as I thought. I don't think there's that much.
The most of the overlap is with the plot tropes one, and then like other ones.
So rather than go through and talk about the whole thing, what if we pick for each category, we pick the thing we think we're most likely to get and the thing we're least likely to get?
Yeah.
Okay, so under setting, the thing I think I'm most likely to see is like an old library, and I think you have that as well.
I do, yes.
So I do think we'll be in an old library at some point. I don't have any feelings about it whatsoever. I do like old libraries. So like, sure, put me in an old library. The one that I think I'm least likely to see is an underground secret tunnel.
Oh, I love a secret tunnel.
But I want it.
Yeah. In National Treasure 2, there's an underground secret tunnel, and I love it.
In the book I just read that I was complaining about, there is also an underground secret tunnel, but it's so stupid that it exists in this particular world. You have to live in a world where it makes sense for this thing to exist.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense to me in that world.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is my least likely.
The one I think is most likely to happen is a country estate. Just because I feel like, especially in the older books, I feel like there's just going to be one. And I like a country estate just fine. I think it, just like a dusty library, I feel like those are things that are so quintessentially mystery that it's fun to see them. The one that I don't think they'll see, most of mine are pretty generic, I think. I guess the one that would be least likely, I think, is that a whole story takes place in a confined location. You know, we didn't do research on these books a ton, but we did read the description. I don't remember any that would fit that description, but, you know, this would be a story like Murder on the Orient Express, right? Where they're all on the train the whole time, or what's that one movie, Snakes on a Plane? Like, where everyone's on a plane.
There's a term for it. Is it a closed door or a closed loop or something like that?
Well, locked room mystery can be different, because locked room means that the mystery took place in a room where all the doors were locked and there was no way to enter, but they don't necessarily have to stay there the whole time. So you could have a locked room mystery that's not in a confined locale.
But there is a term for it, and I just don't know.
I think there is. I just don't know it. I would love to see that. I don't think we will.
All right, so characters, our next category. We had both put a mustachioed man. We are expecting mustaches. Really, really big, bushy, prodigious. And I already know we're going to see it because we're reading one of the Cat Who mysteries. And Quillen does have, so I'm probably cheating with that one, but I'm still going to give it to, maybe I'll count anybody other than him, because I really wasn't thinking about him when I picked that one. That one's just a bonus. One thing I think I will get, I don't necessarily want it, is I think I'll get dirty cops who are in on it or who are obstructing,
looking past it.
Yeah, probably I'm expecting those to be maybe some of our later ones.
I feel like starting in the 1950s, that became like a really big trope, the dirty cops. Probably something to do with like the mafia stuff that was happening.
One that I don't think I'm going to get, and I don't necessarily want it, but I just think it's too specific, is I think there may be an elderly witness that has dementia, and so they can't. I guess you could also put like any witness that also has some type of a mental illness.
Yeah.
That makes them very unreliable. But what I do want, and this is another thing, I'm just going to give you another bonus, what I do want, and I think it's somewhere in the middle, is a victim that everybody hates.
I have that one in a different category, but I like that one. I think the one that I am most likely to get. See, I think I'm likely to get a lot of mine. It's hard because like one of the things that I wrote is like a crazy mother. I do think that's very tropey. Like there's always some crazy like mother-in-law, some crazy woman who lives down the street, like a crazy woman just like hanging around. The innocent woman who's actually involved in the crime, I also think is very common, but it is more specific.
Yeah.
So I think the thing I will get is a character dealing with war trauma. I feel like that's in a lot of the mysteries, and I'm not entirely sure why that's so common in the mystery genre, but I think I will get that. Because I think even like Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot suffers from war trauma, doesn't he? I feel like that's true. So I think that's the one I'm most likely to get. The one that I think I'm least likely to get, I'll say, is the innocent woman who is actually involved in the crime, because I think it's so specific. It's a common trope, but we're only reading 12 books. So.
Right. Okay, so then in the middle we have the wild card. So maybe we'll come back to the wild card after
Yeah.
we do the other two. So then
the wild card category is kind of like a doing double duty. Like I had more characters that I wanted, or I had more tropes, and so I, moved them to the wild card, which I just thought made sense in the middle instead of at the end of this bingo board.
Well, then we do tend to put the wild card in the middle. So the other one is plot and tropes. Mm-hmm. I don't have any of these that I necessarily think. Well, I guess my most likely one is blackmail. And I was not specific as to who's getting blackmailed, but I just think blackmail will occur. Mm-hmm. The one that I want, that I think is always fun, is when the detective becomes the target. I think that one's always fun.
The one I think we'll get is a locked room mystery. I feel like that's one of the most common types of mysteries. How the person got there. There's the famous Poe locked room mystery that people never bring up, where like it was the gorilla that did it. And they don't bring it up because it's stupid. I feel like that's, it's one of the most easy ways to set up a mystery if you have a room where a crime was committed and you can't figure out how the person got in there to commit it. So I think we'll see a locked room mystery. I don't really have any feelings over it either way. They can be fun when done right, because it's like shocking how it was pulled off. But
the Psychology of Time Travel, which I just told you I read, was a locked door mystery and was absolutely insane because it involved time travel.
Right.
Specifically, time traveling bullets.
Oh.
Yeah.
A spin.
Yeah.
What do I think we're least likely to get? Probably the faked death, which I did want. I feel like the fake death is going to be less common. I feel like also faked death would have been mentioned. Well, maybe not. I was going to say I feel like it would be mentioned in the description, but if it was pivotal to the mystery, then it wouldn't have been mentioned.
Right.
But I don't think we'll get a faked death.
I don't know. We'll see.
This is the category where I have my no one likes the murder victim, which you had. So I put it in the tropes.
Okay, so investigation is our last column. So the most likely one, I think, is going to be that the police are incompetent.
Yeah. I have several that are like that, but they're more specific.
I've got one that is similar. I have the police refuse to believe that the murders are connected, which to me is not the same thing as the police being incompetent. It's like a different thing.
Yeah.
The one that I think is least likely to happen is that the love interest ends up being the murderer.
That's fun. It's like an Indiana Jones.
Yeah, which is thematic.
We didn't explain the title of this podcast at all. And that
I did say we were going to read the other books that nobody else was reading because we're not like the other readers.
Yeah, but how does that have to do with Indiana Jones? Just that we liked the pun.
I don't know. Can we leave it up to our listeners to make the connection?
I guess they'll have to. Yeah. So I have on here, there's no official investigation due to the misjudged death. Like it was declared a suicide, so they don't investigate. And I think that's kind of like the incompetent police. But again, it's different. Then I also have wrongly accused goes to jail in the first half, which is definitely an incompetent police. So that is the one that I think is most likely to happen. A wrongly accused person goes to jail in the first half. Oh no, the killer's still out there, whatever. So I think that's the most likely to happen.
All right, and then back to wild card. I kind of want to talk about all mine, just very quickly. I don't know which one. I think, okay, so the ones that I think are totally possible, this is where I put fake death. I put it in the wild card. I think letters to the press from the murderer, a la Jack the Ripper or the Zodiac Killer.
I was just thinking about Jack the Ripper.
A calling card.
I have something similar in my plot tropes. Like mine says mysterious aid comes in the form of a letter or note. Perhaps that letter or note or the mysterious aid is from the killer themselves.
Maybe. Could be accidentally like that one guy in Kansas who thought he was smarter than the police. And they were like, hey, he's like, I'm going to give you something, but it was on like a floppy disk or something. And they were like, no, we totally can't track you down using a floppy disk. It's totally fine for you to use that. But then they did. They tracked him down using the floppy disk or something like that. One that I think is possible, a fire or explosion that destroys evidence. I feel like that's pretty common. And the one that I want that I think would be very fun is a cult.
Oh, I do love a cult story. Okay, so in my wild card, my wild card was basically like stuff from all the other things that I ran out of space for, so all the other categories, and stuff that's like super, super specific. So one of mine is there is a large and important meal, which is something that I really love when we all gather around a table. I'm imagining like all of the meals and then there were none. It's like the only book I've ever read. So, whatever. The crime was actually an accident is another one that I have, which I both love and hate. It's one of those things that I guess I never see coming, so it always surprises me, but it also always leaves me with this feeling like I'm not really sure it was satisfying. Like, I'm not sure it was a satisfying surprise. Another one I have is the main character is thought of as like a washed up version of themselves, which I feel is really common, especially post like 1950s. They're trying to make their big comeback. And then I have told in multiple perspectives on my wild card. The one that I like the most, that I'm most looking forward to, is Countdown Clock. There's like a timer, the bomb will go off in 24 hours. If they don't figure out where the location is, everyone's gonna die. I love that type of tension. Both Bobby and I are fans of Psych. I think you're a fan of Psych too, right? It's one of my all-time favorite shows, so it is like my gateway to mystery, probably, if you count Psych episodes as mystery, which they're kind of. Very Scooby-Doo like. That's really my realm. Some of my favorite episodes are the ones with the Yin Yang Killer, the Yin Yang trilogy. I think it's like season 3, 4, and 5, their finale episodes. And they get these letters from the killer, which has my other one. The mysterious aid comes in the form of the letter. So the letter is like giving them clues for the murder, but they also know that at the end of the day, there will be a murder if they don't figure out these clues in time. I just think it's really well done. I think it builds tension really well. It is some of my favorite episodes of that show. I think it's really good. So I would love to see a countdown clock in one of these mysteries. And that's my wild card.
So in addition to playing bingo as we are reading, another thing that we're going to be doing is ranking the detectives themselves.
Yes.
Based on how well we think they're going to be able to solve our own murders.
Yes.
My murder, at the moment, I don't know, I'm thinking about it, but my murder, I have always said that I am probably going to die by tripping over a cat and then, bonking my head on something. So I think that's how my death is going to happen in my fictional reality and possibly in my real reality. So I am going to be ranking the detectives on how well they will be able to figure out that it wasn't actually a murder. I'm going to assume that I have a lot of enemies, and that's why they're going to think immediately that somebody offed me and not that I just got murdered by a beloved pet.
My murder is going to be poison. I think poisoning is like a classic murder.
It's a very female method of murdering.
It can be kind of planned. There's some really great stories where the poisoning takes place over a long time. So they develop this long sickness. But I think my poisoning will imitate the death of a heart attack. So it'll look like I've had a heart attack. So it's up to the detective to figure out that it wasn't natural causes. It was a murder. So they're going to have to dig deep.
In addition to that, in addition to ranking the detectives, I sent Rachel a reel by the author Geneva Rose
Who's great
on Instagram, and it was about how it's one of her most recent reels at the time of recording this, but she was talking about how she's like 5 stars is not a good method of rating books. My new method is whether or not the cover, you love it enough to bedazzle the cover. And so that is her. She's like, I'm not doing stars anymore. I'm doing bedazzled covers. And so we were talking about, I sent that to Rachel, and her response was, well, you're right. We need a new rating system because stars aren't doing it for us anymore.
I've been complaining a lot recently about stars. I had read this one book that I didn't like at all, and I went to look at the reviews, and they were like, well, I didn't like it, but I gave it 5 stars because it had this thing that I was looking for, like a certain type of male hero show, but they didn't like the book. And it was like, so you can't add a star for that. That's like, just because it has one thing that you like doesn't mean that you can add a star for it. And then I was talking about this other book that I was reading the other day. I stopped at like page 200. I was like well into this book. And I was like, I'm not gonna read this anymore. It's horrible. I don't want to. And so I went to like go look at the reviews to see if other people thought it was as boring as I did. And one of the reviews was like, well, it wasn't for me, but I went ahead and gave it 4 stars because I think if you like this type of thing, you would like it. And it was like, well, if you like it, then you would give it 5 stars. That's not what it means. So I feel like stars have lost everything. I look at a star rating on a book and I'm like, that means absolutely nothing to me.
Yes.
We're obviously functioning on a different system. So I think while we try to read these books and discuss them, we're going to be coming up with some sort of new ranking system.
Penny Reed, who is a romance author, who you will be hearing more from in the coming days.
Or more about.
More about. Also from, because she does have like 3 books coming out this year.
Nice.
Prolific doesn't even begin to explain Penny. We are both...
Spoiler alert, we're huge fans.
Big super fans. Without actually, I've never read a single book of Penny's. Deeply excited to just really get in there. But stay tuned. Stay tuned for more of that. She uses a rating system called Level of Awesome.
Which is so cool.
It's
She's
so great.
Just the coolest.
So if you go to her website, for instance, if I go to Grin and Bearded, this is the second book in the Winston Brothers series by the wonderful and amazing Penny Reed. Under the details, she will give you, some how many words, how many pages, what series it goes in. And then she has a Level of Awesome rating. And her Level of Awesome rating for Grin and Bearded is plus size.
Oh, fun.
Who knows what that could possibly mean, who that would apply to, if that's even a pun. You never know. You never know with Penny. So we're thinking something where we could, in just like one word or phrase, convey what this book's like rating is.
I was contemplating some sort of, I'm really into productivity hacks because whatever. So one of the things that they do when they're like doing goals for each day is like urgency versus like importance and ranking them that way. So I'm thinking if we can come up with like several levels where we can get like a couple words and we can give it that. I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but something along those lines is where my heart is.
So now we've reached our final segment, and this is going to be a normal recurring segment to help us wrap it up. We'll talk about what we are currently reading.
Well, before we get there, we should invite everyone to make their own bingo board.
Oh, did we not? Oh, no, we didn't do that. Not in this timeline.
There's an alternate timeline where we did. But in this timeline, we haven't done it. So we're going to have our bingo board. We'll link it in the description here, like the blank copy, which will just be like PDF on a Google Drive where you can go grab it. And we will also have it linked on our website, which is on teeny.com. And you'll be able to see both Bobby and I's completed bingo board, and you can make your own bingo board. Part of the reason we're doing the bingo board is to kind of keep us engaged with these books that might not be super great. Like, we did not pick these books because they're like the best in the genre. We have no idea what we're getting into.
Some of them are receivers of the Poe Award for several years, starting in like the mid 50s, I believe. They started giving out the Edgar Allan Poe Award. It seems to be primarily, they call it best novel, but they're all mysteries. So we did pick a lot of our books starting in the 1950s from that list.
And as a lover of Edgar Allan Poe, I'm sure like post 50s they're going to be great.
That was a concession on my part. So follow along with your bingo board. Our next book, did I already tell them what the next book is? Who knows?
I don't think so.
Let's find out. So our next book, of course, is going to be The Circular Staircase by Mary Roberts Rinehart. And that episode is going to be coming out on Tuesday, March 25th. That's 2 weeks from today. So you've got 2 weeks to run to your library. If you can't find it at your library, and if you don't mind reading a digital copy, you can get it from Project Gutenberg. So we will post a link to that in the description so you can go grab that. That's how I'm reading it. I put that on my Kobo because I'm a Kobo girly. So highly recommend you take advantage of Project Gutenberg or your library.
And then do fill out your bingo board before you begin reading so that you can really start marking things off now. Who knows if this book will be engaging or good. So get your bingo board filled out first.
Okay. So what have we been reading lately? I'll go first. I read multiple books at a time. I'm a mood reader. I like to be able to kind of pick and choose what matches my vibe at the moment. moment. It also helps me sort of push myself through books that I'm not necessarily interested in reading, but I know that reading them would be good for me, or it's a book that I own and so I need to read it. One of the ways that I do kind of help push myself through books is every night I read one chapter of a book, my chapter a day book. Currently my chapter a day book is not Caraval, it is Legendary by Stephanie Garber. It's not that it's a bad book, it actually is an enjoyable series, but the problem is that I read Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber and I really, really liked it. I really enjoyed that entire series. And so then I next read her Caraval series, which was not Once Upon a Broken Heart. And that was on me because I should have read Caraval first. And I think that would have set me up perfectly because it is a prequel to the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. So after I read Once Upon a Broken Heart, I was like, I need every Stephanie Garber. This scratched every itch. It ticked every box. This is my jam. So I went out and I bought every Stephanie Garber, which is the thing I'm trying to curb this year. But I have read the first two Caravals. They're just not doing it for me. They're not bad, but I do need to read it because I own it. So that is my chapter a day book that I'm reading at night. I am also reading A Reaper at the Gates, which is the third book in the An Ember in the Ash series by Saba Tahir, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing. I'm so sorry. It is not the vibe that I want right now. It's a very good book series. It's very, very good. It's very well written. It's very intricate. It's very detailed. I do not love that she's making me read the POV of a character that I don't like. Please stop making me do that. But she is continuing to do that. But I'm reading that through Libby, or Overdrive is what Libby has become in Georgia or whatever. I don't know. I'm not sure how it's going, but I have that checked out. And so if you know anything about reading books from the library on your e-readers, that when those books become available, you've got a little window of time to accept and read the book, or you have to go back on the waiting list. So that's what's happening right now, is I am just reading it because it is currently available. And then thirdly, I am reading True or False, A CIA Analyst's Guide to Spotting Fake News by Cindy Otis. Look at this fun cover. It's so nice.
It is very bright. People
so
can't see it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll link to it. I don't know. But anyway, I am reading this. This is for school because deep in my heart, I really want to introduce a nonfiction unit, a research-based unit I teach 8th grade English, and I want to do a full research media literacy unit next year. And I would like to get a class set of these and use them as part of my research unit. But it is absolutely fascinating because it was written in like 2018, I think.
Oh, wow.
So it's very recent. And so it has like screenshots of tweets. Like it tracks the history of the Pizzagate thing and how that became a thing and why that's actually not true. So it's very, very interesting and very, very relevant. It talks about Jack the Ripper and how there was a lot of fake news involved in Jack the Ripper.
There's still a lot of fake news involved in Jack the Ripper. Anytime I listen to a Jack the Ripper thing and they don't like nail that history, I do get upset.
Sorry,
I'm like, what is this?
Can't trust you. Or did you do your research on Twitter? What are you doing? So that is what I'm currently reading. I like to be always reading a book for school, so this is my current school read. What I need right now, above all things, is I need a comfortable, cozy read. And what I want, and that I cannot have right now, is I really want to dive into the Penny Reed universe.
Yes.
But I am not allowed to do so for another couple of weeks, so...
Spoilers.
Would
you like to hear a really sad lore anecdote about me and the nonfiction unit I used to teach my 8th graders?
Probably.
We did have a nonfiction unit, and it involved writing a research paper about something they cared about. Something relevant to what was happening today, something they cared about. And this was probably like March 1st, 2020, in class. One of my students wants to write about the coronavirus in China. I mean, maybe it was like February 18th. It was like right before spring break. And he was like, Miss, what if it comes to the United States? And I said,
oh no,
you don't need to worry about that.
Oh no.
That was the last time I ever saw that kid because we went to spring break and they canceled school and we never had another session. And I think about that moment all the time. I was like, wow,
your last words to that child were so incorrect.
I was so naive. I was like, that can't happen here.
It did.
And it did.
It did happen.
It super did. So that really, honestly, it really changed my like outlook on life, right? Like, what can and will happen here. But it really affected me, but I have thought about that kid so often.
I wonder if he also tells this story.
I'm sure he does. God, he's probably like, yeah, she was dumb. She was the worst teacher ever. I swear I was normally a very good teacher. The news felt further away back in March of 2020 before it came here. Like, it all felt further away. And I think it's good that I experienced that, because now I'm like, no, the news, like, it's here. Like, what is happening there is also happening here. Like, it was a really eye-opening conversation. Anyways, the books that I'm reading, I don't even know if we can keep that in. That's so embarrassing for me. I am unlike you. I cannot read multiple books at a time unless it's like a fiction and a nonfiction, or a fiction and like a short story anthology. So a lot of times I'll read like fiction during the day and a nonfiction at night, or a short story anthology at night. I am one of those people, if the book isn't hitting when I'm reading it, I will drop it. And if I drop it, I've dropped it forever. So I have dropped like 2 books in the last like couple of weeks, one at like 100 pages, one at like 200 pages. And, you know, I technically could pick those back up. So I could claim that I'm reading them now, but I don't think I ever will. So they're gone. What I am currently reading is Love Me Do by Lindsay Kelk, which is like a Cyrano retelling.
Oh,
it's pretty fun. I was pretty enchanted with Lindsay Kelk. I saw her speak at one of the panels that I went to at Love Y'all Fest, and she was really delightfully funny and smart. She has a podcast for wrestling, which I think is very fun, even though I'm not a fan of wrestling. I just think it's fun when people have like a weird podcast. Like, I think that's cool. So, you know, possibly because I have a weird podcast.
Or do you have a podcast because you think it's cool when people have a podcast?
It's hard to say. But she was very fun. And she had talked about what it was like to write romance in the time when everyone hated romance. Like, because it's kind of having like a comeback right now. It's really big on Book Talk. And so she was talking about, because she's been in the game for like decades. So she was talking about what it was like back before people were interested in romance. And so she was just really interesting. So I really wanted to read one of her books next. So I'm working through that right now. And I don't think... I had mentioned earlier that I'm in the Forever Young Adult Book Club, the national one, and their February book is Sinner's Isle. So that's the one I'm going to start as soon as I finish Love Me Do. The author of Sinner's Isle was also at Love Y'all Fest that we went to, and we saw her speak, and she was really delightful. She was the best person on the panel that we went to, on that one panel that we went to. That wasn't very good, but she was really delightful.
She was very good on a not good panel.
Yeah, so we were like, we should read her book. And I did know that it was the author for my Forever Young Adult Book Club book. So I had already known I was going to read it. So that was another reason that I had wanted to see her. So I could kind of like vibe check. It's fun to see if like a author has good vibes before you read their book. And she did. So it made me really excited to read it. And I sent my husband a text message while we were in the conference. And I was like, please go to the library and get me this book. Because I'm on a low buy year. So I'm trying not to buy a lot of things. So most of my books I get from the library. And they didn't have an online version of her book. They only had it in person, and I didn't want anyone else to be able to get it. So while I was in Georgia, I sent my husband out to go buy it, or to go get it from the library.
I had such a bad habit of, I bought so many books from Love Y'all, specifically because I sat in a panel, and the author of that book was just so charming to me.
Right.
That I was like, well, gotta go buy the book now. So I bought like 6 books. No, I bought 5 books, and then 2 of them came with a closing keynote, and then one of them was Diana's, who obviously I was going to buy hers.
Diana Biller, friend of the podcast, love her books.
Yes. And then I got 2 penny reads, and that was just, I was already going to get those. But then I went to her panel and was like, well, that's who I want to be when I grow up. That's hard.
I also bought a lot of books at Love Y'all Fest just because it felt right. I am on a low buy year. I haven't bought any other books this year, and I don't plan to, but because we were at this festival and I wanted to show support for certain authors that I thought, really had good vibes. Lauren Connolly was one who I read one of her books before we went, and it was one of my favorite books that I read before we went to the conference, convention, festival.
We're not sure. Whatever it was. The Gathering.
So it was one of my favorites. And then we saw her talk and I was like, oh, well, she's also super charming. And she had said that she self-publishes and traditional publishes and indie publishes. And I was like, oh, that's very cool. I love that. Well, I said I'm really into productivity. I love a hustle girly. So I was like, I'm going to buy one of her books to support her. And honestly, she didn't have a lot that I was super interested in. So I just kind of had to pick one. But I did pick one just to show my support to the author. I think if you can support authors, I think that's great. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. If you enjoyed, please follow or subscribe to the podcast.
You can find us on Blue Sky at Readers Pod or read more from our blog at onteeny.com.
If you happen to be a fan of K-pop, specifically ATEEZ, check out our first podcast, Holla Chat.
We'll see you next time. Be the light.